Okay, well, now to what Jess and I have been waiting for all morning. In our last half hour, we spoke about the great work of Harry Belafonte.
Well, we thought we'd go a step further with our own special tribute to Harry. Now, this isn't one of his original songs. In fact, it dates back to 1949, but Harry's version in 1961 is the one most fondly remembered. Hold on to your hats. Here are Andrew and Simon with Hole in the Bucket.
Tribute is a very loose word. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Lizer, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Lizer, a hole. Then fix it, dear Henry, then fix it, dear Henry, fix it. With what shall I fix it, dear Lizer, with what shall I fix it, dear Lizer, with what? With straw, dear Henry, with straw, dear Henry, with straw. The straw is too long, dear Lizer, the straw is too long, dear Lizer, too long. Then cut it, dear Henry, just cut it, dear Henry, cut it. With what shall I cut it, dear Lizer, with what shall I cut it, dear Lizer, with what? With an axe, dear Henry, with an axe, dear Henry, an axe. The axe is too blunt, dear Lizer, the axe is too blunt, dear Lizer, too blunt. Then sharpen it, dear Henry, just sharpen it, dear Henry, hone it. On what shall I sharpen it, dear Lizer, on what shall I sharpen it, dear Lizer, on what? On a stone, dear Henry, on a stone, dear Henry, a stone. But the stone is too dry, dear Lizer, the stone is too dry, dear Lizer, too dry. Then wet it, dear Henry, just wet it, dear Henry, wet it. Okay, with what shall I wet it, dear Lizer, with what shall I wet it, dear Lizer, with what? Try water, dear Henry, try water, dear Henry, try water, my man. With what shall I fetch it, dear Lizer, with what shall I fetch it, dear Lizer, with what? In a bucket, dear Henry, in a bucket, dear Henry, bucket. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Lizer, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Lizer, a hole. It's a silly little song. Big hit, though. Good job, brother. All right. Coming up, ever seen an elephant use a phone? Well, I think you've just viewed something similar to that. Stay tuned.
But next, are you coming over to me now? The next Sam Worthington in the Wrath of the Titans.
Tribute is a very nice word. There's a hole in the bucket.